spite house is a building either created or modified just to piss off the neighbors or people who have interest in the property. The greatest example of a spite house is in the 2009 movie Up. They are usually created to make a statement or be a nuisance for the purpose of being a nuisance. In some countries following civil law, such as Finland, construction of these sorts of buildings are even illegal. Let's go through some wild cases. What is largely considered the first case is the Old Spite House in Marblehead, Massachusetts, built in 1716 and is still standing at the intersection of Orange Street and Gashouse Lane. Over the years, the story has gone through many variations, but the main theme is always a sibling rivalry. It was supposedly built by a local sailmaker named Robert Wood for 2, possibly 3, squabbling brothers employed as local fishermen. The brothers hated each other so much that they lived in separate sections of the house, including a 10-foot wide addition that protrudes out of the main house, seemingly with the sole purpose of obstructing the other brother's view. Another version says that Wood was displeased with his share of the inheritance, so he built the house to block the view of the water from his brother's adjacent homes. A more famous and established spite house was built in 1806 by Thomas McCobb in Rockport, Maine. The story goes that James McCobb, an Irish immigrant, arrived in what is now Phippsburg, Maine in 1731. Along with his wife Beatrice, he raised a family of 10 children, one of which was Thomas McCobb, who became a sea captain. In 1774, James built a handsome federal period house for his second wife, Hannah Nicole, with whom he had 3 more children, consisting of twin daughters and a second son also named Thomas, if it wasn't already confusing enough. He got married for a third time in 1782 to Mary Langdon Storer Hill. After James had died, while Thomas McCobb was away at sea, his stepmother, Mary Hill, broke James's will and claimed his house for their family. When Thomas returned home from his voyage, he discovered what had happened. So, he decided to build a much more elaborate home deliberately near the stolen home. In a twist of irony, Thomas apparently never married and had no children. As a result, when he died, the house was given over to the Hill family. In 1925, it was rescued from demolition when the entire house was moved to Rockport, at which time extensive wings were added and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1974. Star Wars creator George Lucas owns a large ranch in Marin County, California, which is a highly affluent neighborhood. He had for years talked about creating a 263,701 square foot Lucasfilm production studio on the land, but local residents protested the project. In 2012, he scrapped the project and worked with the local government to turn it into low-income housing for seniors, nurses, and teachers who service the county but cannot afford to live there. The project would consist of 120 2- and 3-bedroom workforce residences and 104 1- and 2-bedroom residences for seniors. The complex would also have a community center, a pool, an orchard, a small farm, a barn, interior roadways, and a bus stop. After 3 years of more stonewalling from neighbors, Lucas decided to pay $150 million to get the houses built himself. This seemed to piss off the neighbors even more, seeing as they sued him in a $70 million environmental lawsuit. It is suspected Lucas went about this project to spite his neighbors after stopping his studio from being built, given that Marin County had a long history of what has been named "not in my backyard" or NIMBY attitudes, where the rich property owners attempt to keep any changes happening to the land, which may or may not be fueled by racial or class undertones, depending on who you ask. One homeowner even said, "I made great sacrifices to be here. I think it's selfish to expect that someone else should be able to acquire it for next to nothing." But Lucas has stated the project was not created out of spite, even if the neighbors felt slighted in the end. As of now, the project remains in limbo. Built in 1814 and owned by Dr. John Tyler, one of the first physicians to perform a cataract surgery, this house was built to spite the entire town government. The city of Frederick, Maryland, made plans to extend Record Street through Tyler's land to meet West Patrick Street. However, he found a loophole in the law that said roads couldn't be built on land, that had a house on it or had a house that was under construction. So, he hired a construction crew to put a foundation in overnight. When the city road crews arrived in the morning, they found a hole in the ground with workmen in it. The house had 17 rooms, 7 bedrooms, 4 full baths, 3 half baths, 9 fireplaces at more than 9,000 square feet. He would ultimately never live in the house itself, but instead rented it out and later sold it. Topeka, Kansas is the home of the Westboro Baptist Church, who are famous for their anti-gay picketing protests towards the LGBTQ community. Topeka is also home to the Equality House, a home bought by Planting Peace founder Aaron Jackson, who had the house painted into a rainbow to show solidarity for the LGBTQ community. They both also happen to be neighbors. According to Jackson, the house was painted not to start a war, but just to stand as the opposing view. While Planting Peace and the Westboro Baptist Church disagree with each other as organizations, Jackson also said that members of the organization are often cordial with one another. The leaders of the church, however, not so much. When contacted for a comment about the Equality House by Business Insider in 2021, they responded with an email that said, "The only equality that you need to worry about is that every human equally deserves to go to hell. This, nor anti-gay graffiti and a few shootings at the house have deterred Planting Peace. In fact, in 2016, Planting Peace, with the help of benefactors, was able to buy the house next door and painted it into the colors of the transgender flag." In 1883, the Victoria Hotel was planned in Amsterdam, Netherlands, in order to capitalize on the opening of Amsterdam Central Station nearby. German architect J.F. Henkenhaff had bought all the surrounding buildings on the block in order to build his hotel, but ran into a problem when 2 homeowners refused to sell. A tailor and a liquor store owner, even though they kept getting offered more and more money, they kept holding out for a higher offer. Eventually, Henkenhaff decided to be innovative and design the hotel around the 2 homes that now sit beside the hotel 130 years later at 45 and 47 Prince Hendrikade. The story of the 2 owners became a book called Public Works and later was adapted to a movie called A Noble Intention in 2015. The Hollensbury Spite House, located at 523 Queen Street in Alexandria, Virginia, was built in 1830 by John Hollensbury, a brickmaker and city council member. The house is only 7 feet 6 inches, or 2.3 meters wide, inside an alleyway. There are 3 possible stories as to how the home came to be, but the best known one is that Hollensbury was tired of people loitering around the alleyway next to his home that had gathered considerable damage from horse-drawn carriages. So he built a house in the alleyway to prevent people from using it. The other story follows a similar vein, but instead of random loiterers, he and his best friend were neighbors. But the friendship went sour when the friend's horse-drawn carriage kept damaging his house, so he built the house in the alleyway to spite his neighbor. The third story is that Hollensbury built the home for his 2 daughters, and one lived in it during her adult years. Located in Boston, Massachusetts, at 44 Hull Street, the Skinny House has the title of the narrowest house in Boston, given its 10.4-foot or 3.16 meter wide front-facing side, and even narrower 9.25-foot or 2.82 meter back. According to Boston News, 2 brothers inherited land from their father when he died. While one brother was away in the military, the other built a large home on the land, leaving the soldier only a shred of property that he felt was too tiny for his brother to build on. When the soldier returned, he found that his brother spent most of the inheritance and had only a narrow space left on the land. So, he built a house anyway to spite his brother by blocking the sunlight and ruining his view. In 1880, Adam Schilling owned around 80 acres of land adjoining the town of Hiawatha, Kansas. He then sold 3/4 of an acre of land to James Falloon, who built a home on the land. Later, Schilling wanted to build on his 80 acres as an addition to the town and attempted to buy the land back from Falloon, but gave him a low offer. Out of spite, Schilling built a tenement house 13 feet from Falloon's property and offered it to low-income African-American families. The idea was to make Falloon's home undesirable and annoy him by renting to people he might find objectionable. In response, Falloon sued Schilling, citing that very idea in order to get Schilling to remove the building by considering it a nuisance. The case ended at the Kansas Supreme Court, who ended up ruling in Schilling's favor, stating that a property owner has the right to improve their land as they see fit, even if their actions are motivated by spite towards a neighbor. According to Newbury, Massachusetts lore, a pink house was built while a local couple was in the process of finalizing their divorce in the 1920s. As part of the divorce agreement, the wife required her husband to build an exact replica of their family home. Unfortunately for her, she didn't specify exactly where. With a stroke of malicious compliance, the husband did exactly what she wanted, but since she didn't specify where the house should be built, he set it up in the middle of a salt marsh, making the house uninhabitable. The house was used as a summer home by the husband at times, but has been sitting empty since the 2000s. Even though the house was scheduled to be demolished multiple times throughout the years, a small band of community members called Support the Pink House have kept it as a landmark. However, after extensive research, the history of the house is inconclusive, as multiple records seem to contradict and support a similar story. The true story seems more that the husband tricked his wife into thinking they were going to start their new life with their son, only to abandon her there with little money and no car, while he went about his life, even having dinner at his mother's house, and seeing another woman in Boston. Unfortunately, the pink house was eventually torn down by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. In 1902, a Freeport, New York developer named John Randall opposed all of Freeport being laid out in a grid. So, to spite the grid designers, he put up a Victorian-style house virtually overnight on a triangular plot of land at the corner of Lena Avenue and Wilson Place, forcing them to divert. The Freeport Spite House, also known as the Miracle House, is still standing and occupied today. Randall wrote in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle on March 5, 1902, that a straight line would reduce his frontage of land so as to make it worthless. In 1904, a family of eccentrics called the Edlestons lived in Gainford, England. The children of the family had inherited a bit of wealth and land from their father, Joseph Edleston, when he died in 1895. He had served as the vicar of Gainford at the Church of St. Mary's for over 40 years. To commemorate their father's dedication to the church, the children asked if there could be a monument put up in his honor. The church refused, stating there was no space, but since the children had inherited the land right next to the graveyard, the church said they should donate some of the land to them and erect the monument there. Feeling slighted by the notion, the Edlestons instead built the Edleston Hall, where they lived thereafter. In the 1920s, they bought a 40-foot commemorative column and placed it right in front of the church that towered above the trees out of spite. The Edleston Hall is still standing and occupied today, and has MCMIV 1904 in Roman numerals over the front door. In the early 1900s, businessman Chang Toy, also known as Sam Kee, bought a standard 30-foot lot at the corner of Pender and Corral streets in Vancouver, Canada. However, the city needed to widen one of the streets, so it took 24 feet of the land, leaving him with only 6 feet. In 1912, Toy made a bet with another business owner that he could still make a building on the land. Thus, the Sam Kee Building was constructed, with the fully functional building originally containing retail shops in its 4 feet 11 inches or 1.5 meter wide first floor, with living quarters on the second floor and a public bathhouse in the basement. It received a record for the world's shallowest commercial building by the Guinness Book of World Records. In 1878, Austria-Hungary gained control of Bosnia and Herzegovina via the Treaty of Berlin. The first order of business was transforming Sarajevo by creating a huge city hall and library next to the Mijatska River in the center of the city. However, in order to do this, they needed to build on land that was already occupied. So in 1892, they bought and tore down all of the buildings except for one that was owned by an old man who refused to sell his house to the city. Lengthy negotiations ensued between the old man and the city, where even the Austro-Hungarian Minister of Finances had to get involved, until finally, in 1895, a deal was struck. He agreed to sell his property under 2 conditions: a sack full of gold coins, and the city would have to move his entire house, brick by brick, and rebuild it on the other side of the river. According to legend, he sat every day in the middle of a bridge smoking cigarettes and carefully watching the workers transport each brick across the river. When the house was finally rebuilt, it was named Inatkucha, or the House of Spite, and in 1977 became a restaurant under the same name that operates to this day.